Perfect, thank you, sir. All right, guys, bear with me for a moment. Let's set this up here. Beautiful. Okay, great to meet you guys. I'm excited to be here. This is my first time running through this deck, so I was up until like almost 3 a.m. last night doing this because I want to make sure this time is well used for you guys. I've run a firm. I know how important it is to take a whole day. You've probably got clients blowing you up right now about an IRS letter or whatever it might be. That's the most stressful thing that will happen to them this year, and it's your everyday. So I know that very well, and it's a big part of why I started Juno a couple years ago to try to improve the work that we do. So we'll talk a little bit about this, but as you guys really well know, there's been so little innovation from a technology perspective in this industry, and even like very basic questions from a client can be incredibly complex, right? You have to go look at the return, figure out what happened last year that's not going to happen this year, learn about new tax law changes that are happening almost every year at this point. It's hard to be proactive. It's hard to be on top of things. It's hard to know everything, which is what your clients expect from you. In fact, like probably impossible. So we deal with the same problems year after year. And I think I have a message of hope for you today, both with not just Juno, but just the industry and the technology that's happening here. I think you're seeing a real shift in the way we're able to do our jobs, and I think that's going to accelerate really quickly. So I'll end on a positive note, but I do want to talk about AI and some of the things that, the tools that are going to come for you guys to improve what you do. So we're not dealing with the same problems every single tax season. So you guys know the job very well, but I'll just lay out the problem set here, which is we have endless busy work, right? A lot of our time is spent making sure that we make zero mistakes, which is an expectation you have in very few professions. And hilariously, you get a 92% in school, it's an A. You get a 92% on a tax return, you are going to be out of business really, really quickly. Humans just are not that great at doing things at a perfect level, which is what the expectation is from our clients. We also are trying to be perfect in the face of deadlines, right? So something like for your firms, I would imagine 60 or 70% of folks are coming through between February and April 15th. And even though in California we've had like wildfires and all the different things, and my people are on extension more than they have been in the past, I still feel the press of trying to get everything done. And as much as I harass them, they don't get their stuff to me until 3 weeks before the deadline. So we're working tons and tons of hours to try to get things done under extreme time pressure. And in terms of real value, there's a lot of different stats about this, but most small firms are not providing advisory services outside of the tax return, right? So, and I'm just talking about tax in this particular instance, but it's really hard, even at the end of the day when you review a return, to be able to get some insight back to that customer. And one thing I'll say, because I know everyone thinks about this now in terms of where this industry goes, is that advice is why they work with a tax professional. So I try to get my team as much as possible to make sure we're giving them some insight on how they can save money on their taxes, which is a big part of what we do. But it's really hard to do that because by the time you finish reviewing the return, it's already 9 o'clock at night, you want to go put a kid to bed or whatever it might be, there's other things to do, and it's hard to take the extra 30 minutes or an hour to draft that up for every single client and still not charge them more than last year. But modern firms, Peter gave me this quote yesterday, which I thought was great, are not going to be built on headcount. They're going to be built on intelligence. And so there's been an evolution here, and you'll see I only have the last 5 years. I've owned a practice since 2015. I don't think anything important happened in terms of like firm evolution until really like the last 5 years from my perspective. 2015 to 2020, our technology was so bad that I was using like OTP. I don't know if you guys remember those days, but I'm sure we could all tell war stories about the worst software we've used in the tax space, and I think it would dominate any industry's war stories. We were still using that, I think, in 2019, which is insane. But just in the last 5 years, there's been a lot of talk about this in terms of modern firms and CAS and all these different things. And I think, even though we're appropriately skeptical about technology vendors and what they say about their technology, there is now becoming a reality that is firms can actually, operate differently than they have in the past. And I think most people probably believe that. You guys have experienced that, whether it's with TaxDome or different pieces of software that are just a lot better than what we were using before. and you finally start to see it and go like, oh wow, we can use technology here to do something different and to provide a better service. And I know for my firm, I've actually really seen this in the last 2 years when we've got our practice management in place, we have our data all in one place, and then we're able to leverage tools like Juno, which I'll talk about later, to improve the work that we're doing across the board. But I don't think that was real before, and so we have this leftover skepticism, which I think is super appropriate, of anything anyone says about their software. And I don't think that should go away. I think it's one of our values, right? Is like, at least in the, I think the AICPA, like professional skepticism is still somewhere in the ethics code. So that's fine. We still have to make sure that things are working properly and they never make mistakes and all the things. But I do think there's reason to believe that we are entering a new era here because of technology and that will improve the way we do work. And so there's been a few different phases there. We've got digitization, right? Like just getting paper out of the office. I don't know how many of you do. How many of you don't have paper in your office in file cabinets somewhere? Okay. It's a few hands. That's probably a fourth of the room. Yeah, I remember getting rid of my file cabinets. I think that was like 2018 for me. We were ahead of time, and then we suffered because of that, actually. But I was at one point like, hey guys, get the paper out of here. Like we have an extra room in our office that we're paying for every month just because we have like invoices for bookkeeping clients or whatever it might be. That all needs to go away. That was not that long ago in the grand scheme of things, right? But once you digitize, you can start to automate. And everyone is already using automation tools, whether you realize it or not. If you're using any sort of practice management, then there's automation around workflows and things like that. That happened really quickly in the grand scheme of things, right? Like I actually don't think there was really great practice management until probably close to 2020. I don't know, Peter probably knows better than I do, but we finally took the leap, I think, in 2021. Originally with Carbon, we switched over to TaxDome now. But they're really good tools. They can improve the way you do work. They can structure. I used to use like a Google Sheets document basically before I switched onto that. And like if one person in my firm filtered that document, everybody else couldn't see what they were supposed to be working on. It's come a long way, and now we rely on that. As like a central hub for information and how we get work done, and it saves us a lot of time, and especially in terms of knowing what people need to be working on, which is a huge challenge. And then what's going to come here, and you guys are going to see it here very quickly, whether it's us or somebody else, is using AI, which you guys are all already using AI, by the way. I know there's a lot of like skepticism and fear around AI, but everyone is using it. Like it's in Microsoft Teams, it's in Gmail if you're using Gmail, it's in TaxDome, it's in your tax software. It's how they get their recommendations, right? If you have like critical diagnostics, whatever it might be. All of that is driven by AI already, so it's already here. And it's going to have a really good impact on what we're doing. So we'll talk a little bit more about that today. One thing I want to say here is if you're using humans to do most of your work, they're probably going to be just as good next year as they were this year. And they're going to be just as good 10 years from now as they were now. Actually, they might be a little bit worse, honestly. But somewhere around flat. But technology is getting better and better. And there are parts of our jobs, like data entry, coming off a W-2 or a 1099, where I'm taking something from box 3 and I'm going and putting it in my tax software into whatever field box 3 goes into. That is not something a human needs to be doing in this era already today, but particularly over the next few years. And if you're using humans to do it, you're going to be at an increasing disadvantage. That's just the reality of it, right? And that whether that's from another accounting firm or whether that's from TurboTax or whatever it might be, automation is going to be really imperative for us to be able to compete and provide a great service for our clients. In some ways, and I'll say this about my own firm because I don't want to point fingers and be negative about it, but we struggle to provide a really great client experience because we're overwhelmed with a question that's more complex than someone thinks it is, or reviewing a return for the third time on something that's very unusual that we want to make sure we get right. And because of that, we provide like a pretty subpar client service. I mean, it's just a reality. I'll say it about my firm just so I don't insult you guys. But like most people don't, like at best, they're kind of indifferent about their accountant. Part of that's because they owe taxes every year, and part of it's because it's compliance related. They would rather just not file taxes. But compared to other professional service industries, we can use the excuse all day long, the tax code's complicated, whatever it might be, but our clients want a better experience. That's just a reality of it, and that's a big part of why I started this company. And I actually fired 40% of my clients in 2021, partially because of COVID, partially because I couldn't find people, and partially because I just felt bad about the service level I was providing for my clients. Like I thought I couldn't respond to their emails. We clipped like 2 million 1 year in revenue, and it's like the wheels fell off for us. I honestly hated it. And I was like, I want to just sell this or leave the industry or do something different. So we fired a bunch of clients, and I was like, I'm going to find a different way to do this, and that was really the origin here of kind of what I'll show you later today. But if you're betting on people, I just will say, it's not going to get better, right? You're going to have to train those people. They may leave to a different firm, then you got to train new people, and they're going to be just as good 10 years from now as they are today. Maybe best case scenario. So it's not just a tech shift, but it's also a business model shift, and lots of people have talked about this, but you guys will know that a traditional firm, right, you're billing based on hours, you're doing work with humans, you're very reactive in terms of the information being provided to you. Generally speaking, like, I don't know, the classic margin thing was a third for people, a third for overhead, a third for profit, right, I think is what my mom always told me. She was a CPA as well. I bought her practice actually originally. It's funny that, Peter, I'd never heard that about the founders about Victor and Ilya, but I also came into this industry because of my mom. I was struggling to do 15 or 20% profit margins with my firm. We're in San Francisco, so people are super expensive before COVID hit. That was always my excuse. And then I had high income clients who were, high price, and so therefore we had to spend a lot of time making sure we were really hands-on with them. But regardless, like making 15% at the end of the year is not that great. Now my firm this year, and I'm not making this up, is running like 50% net margins, not gross, net margins, which is insane. Now we're smaller. I fired a bunch of people that wouldn't do things electronically with us, but we're still running over 50% at this point this year using technology, and that includes the cost of, like, I'm paying for Juno just like everybody else does. So you can have a major impact on your profit margins. Does anyone in this room run? I mean, do this in your head because I don't want to make people raise their hand here. But like, if you think about what your actual margin number is, and how many of you are over 50% net, and I would imagine the number of hands going up would be very, very small in this room. And we work too damn hard to not keep a certain amount of money from the clients that are coming in, right? It's so much to stay on top of that and provide great services and make no mistakes and all the things. But with a modern firm, the one thing I want to say here is it's different in terms of how you hire people. It's different in terms of how you manage clients and the expectations you set. It's different in terms of how you price your product. Those things are important, and there's hundreds of thousands of hours of people talking about that, but it's a real thing. Like, you really do have to be prepared for the automation that will come in terms of the structure of your firm. And I'll give you one little example, which is, like, I moved to a significant portion of my staff is hourly. Part of that's been amazing because I get, like, to be honest, I don't mean to stereotype here, but like, I get a lot of moms who worked at bigger firms that are amazing accountants that don't want to work. They're happy to work in the spring, and then they don't want to work as much in the summer, and it's worked out super well. So I can retain talent like I couldn't before by giving flexibility for my employees. And that's been huge for me because recruiting is just such a battle right now for small firms. I feel sometimes like I get the fourth option, right? It's like there's all the different tiers of firms, and I'm at the very bottom of it. And so I'm begging people to come work for me, and they cost more and more every year. So we've got to use technology to get more efficient. But you do have to do some things in advance to get ready for this, and I'm sure all of you are working on that. If you're coming to things like this, then you've already been thinking about this. But it is real, and you have to have those things in place to be able to take advantage of some of the automation that's going to come. And so at my firm, just at a high level, I actually was like 12 people at the peak, and I'm down to 3 full-time employees, and I have 4 part-time employees. We're running like 53% margins year to date, at least as of a few days ago, and we doubled our productivity this year. So I track very carefully, obviously, probably almost all of you guys do this, hours still on tax returns. We moved to fixed rate pricing or value-based pricing, but we still track hours. And so I can see very clearly productivity on returns, what we did last year, what we did this year. And we actually, the 40% is we've reduced time by 40%, but we did 20% more revenue. So it was like legitimately a doubling in productivity. And that's not to pat myself on the back. Trust me, I'm like not the most I hate yelling at people about their billable time, and so therefore I'm not like the best firm owner in terms of managing productivity. But I was able to do it without even screaming at people about hitting 50 hours or whatever it might be. My people don't want to hit more than 40. And we'll talk about that at the very end, actually. Like, no one worked overtime this tax season for us, which actually is one of the things I'm most proud of. And I say that now in my recruiting when I just hired somebody this week, and I'm like, hey, no one worked overtime this year. Nobody. So, welcome to our firm. You do not need to bill more than 40 hours. I can tell you that right now, ever. Which is a cool thing to be able to say, right? Most other industries have been saying that for a long time. But it's nice to be able to say that about the accounting profession. But we did it by identifying pain points, getting the right tools in place. That's not just like tax automation software. That's your practice management, getting everything in one place, automating, having structure in place for your people so they know what they need to work on, they know what the steps are, they know what the expectations are, they get to see the client emails, right, that have come throughout the year, and then giving them the right tools to work productively. And then restructuring the team roles, we talked a little bit about that. One other thing I want to mention is my admins do a lot more. So as we've automated other things, their time has freed up. And doing data entry doesn't take as long on a tax return when you're using an AI tool to do that. So they can actually do the data entry and create the work papers and rename the files, right, when they're scanning. I don't know if you guys used to have them all break them up and name them the right things, and I remember training people on that. Back in the day, I don't do any of that anymore. Our software does that, and so everything is in a bookmark PDF and it's all done. So when a tax preparer gets it, the 90% of the return is done. And they can just finish the parts that are more strategic, or I think of them as unstructured data, which is not really how accountants think, but the things that are more complex is probably a better way of saying it. And then on client experience, I'll give you a quick funny story. I will bill now, especially since we're value-based, for even emails that I'm doing, which I never used to do because it's just not enough time, and I didn't want to nickel and dime people. But I'll do that now because when I use generative AI to create much more complex, laying out how much someone would save if they're going to form an S corp. Okay, well, that would take me 2 or 3 hours basically if I did it manually. I can do it in 2 minutes now. But one of the things that I have been intentional about is paying for Juno with actual revenue. And so I'll bill people for emails, which I never really did before, but I'm sending them much more thorough emails. And I've had 0 complaints, which is kind of amazing, honestly. But I've had 0 complaints now. I've been doing that for almost a year and a half now. And I'll bill a couple $100 for something that takes me 10 minutes. And I'm giving them a better answer than I was before. So if they bought a rental property, I can send them all the different classes of real estate, and I can send them what material participation looks like and what records they need to keep. And I never would have taken the time to send that much information to a client, because I wouldn't have wanted to bill them $400 for an email. I can do it much faster now, and I can actually bill more for it. And that's just one tidbit. I will say, all of you will have to find your own path in this way with the new industry and the new tools that we have. But I can't believe I've had no one complain about it. It's just been remarkable to see, and I've actually had people thank me when they get a $200 bill because they're like, wow, this is so helpful. Thank you for sending me this much information. Which I just never would have done before. It was too difficult to do. So there's some good stuff coming there. But I will talk a little bit about what worked and what didn't. So you guys need to be thoughtful about technology change, the pace of change. I did have almost my entire staff quit in 2015 when I first bought my mom's practice originally. I changed every piece of software. We went to QuickBooks Online, we went to ProConnect, we went to, we went to OTP, which was, gosh, I can't believe I did that. But we did that, and everyone wanted to quit, basically. I mean, literally remember talking to people and be like, please don't quit. I won't do this ever again, I promise. You have to spread out your technology change, and you have to learn how to adopt new technology. And as technology gets better and moves faster, you will have to spend more of your time on technology change, right? So learning about technology, understanding it, having your staff trained on it, those things will become more central to what you're doing as a firm owner. That'll be really important. Standardizing, getting your data in one place, making sure you're following a similar set of processes, that becomes really important in order to automate. So you've got to standardize to automate. That's just the reality of it. Doing things in a custom way is the opposite of automating. And then getting your team involved. So now when I hire, I talk about technology with folks. I mentioned I just hired someone this week. And we talked about technology in the interview process. I was like, tell me about how you use tech. How do you automate things? Not questions I ever would have asked an accountant, frankly, even 2 years ago. But you really want people that are open-minded to technology change and understand how it's going to make their job better, not take away their job. That is really important because you need them to embrace it. And by the way, a bunch of things have not worked. I mentioned my whole team almost quitting a few years back. I've done a little bit better on that front, but I still have tried to take on too much at times. In terms of automation, it is difficult for people to deal with changing technology. It's hard for them. Accountants love to get it right, and they want to know that they're going to be able to get it right every time. And so that mindset oftentimes is the opposite of what you want for adopting new technology. And that's okay. Like that's a good conflict to have. I do want accountants that want to get it right, generally speaking, but I also need them to be able to take some risks by automating things. And we all do that already by using tax software, right? Like imagine where you'd be if you had to manually fill out a 1040 right now. Like none of us, I don't know if anybody in this room would take that one on. I don't think so. So we already rely on technology to do all this stuff anyways, but relying on new technology is a different thing. And then the pricing model that I mentioned. So, that does need to change from my perspective. I'm sure there will still be firms that can sell hours, but I think that time is going to go away here pretty quickly. So a couple things in the old way and new way. Chasing clients for documents. This has nothing to do with Juno, but is a huge part of our world, right? So that is the old way. You've got to use technology, and super excited, and we'll talk more about this in the next couple weeks. But really excited to be working with TaxDome on their client organizers and some of the things that we're going to do there. I'm very excited for what their team is working on. And our team's actually been helping them because it's just so important for us to reduce the back and forth with clients. And there's just nothing worse. Like I have a 2-hour block and I start to work on this tax return and then I realize I'm missing 3 documents. And I'm like, well, I just lost an hour of my 2 hours and now I don't even know what I'm going to do with the other hour. I didn't have anything else on my to-do list. And I don't have enough time to do a different return. So that's the old way. That's got to go away. The new way, and automated checklist and reminders, like smart systems that know what has been submitted and it checks it off as it comes in, so it's simple enough that anybody on your team can talk to a client and tell them what needs to come in still. That is super, super important. Old way is like training new people every year. I don't know for you guys, I've had plenty of turnover. We went virtual, and I think that was part of it because the virtual job market changed so much. But I feel like I've been training new people for like 5 straight years. And it's really hard to do. I don't have time to do that. I'm trying to get through my reviews and trying to get it up to speed on new tax laws. I don't have time to train new folks. And so I actually don't even hire new folks. I hire people that have like 5+ years of experience. And I still have the margins that I have because I'm automating so much, right? So when you're doing that, you don't have to hire brand new people. To be honest, as a small firm, I've kind of given up on training new people. I don't know that that's a best practice, so don't take that away as a key takeaway here. But I'm just not big enough to do it. I don't have time. I don't do it well. I don't have the patience for it. It's like I need people to work without making mistakes, so I don't have to work as hard as a reviewer. So we got to stop doing that. But the new way is training. I try to avoid that term, but like creating systems that work in a repeatable way. That's the new way, right? So you have a system that works, and you catch things automatically, using computers where computers should be used and using humans where humans should be used, right? Humans should be working on advice and strategy and the complex pieces of a return. They should not be typing in numbers off a brokerage statement. Old way, preparers entering data. So, like I always say, like humans looking at PDFs and then typing those numbers into like something that has box 16 labeled in your tax software. That needs to go away. Should go away already for firms that are willing to adopt it. The new way is people level up. My admins actually do, I want to use this very carefully, they do my tax prep. So they're entering all the data from they're doing it with our system, but they're doing it themselves because actually our system will say like, I don't know what's in box 10, can you clarify it for me? And then admin can look at box 10 on a W-2, like it's just matching a number in a box. Computers aren't perfect at this, but if the systems are set up right, your admins do a lot of your prep work or data entry, if that's less contentious. And then your preparers do a better job reviewing. So they do the strategic piece and they review it. And that will save you time. It saves you money, obviously, in terms of billing rates. And then as a reviewer, I'm the second reviewer now, every time, at least. And to be honest, when you see our review tool, I'd actually say I'm probably the third reviewer now. And so I review differently, and we can talk about that if you guys want at the end. And then let's talk quickly about security. This has to be mentioned in every talk. Incredibly important to understand the security of your data. There's going to be more and more hacks, as you guys know, like it happens all the time now. And it's really important that every team take this very seriously in terms of handling financial data. For folks, I'll give you one silly example. Like when we first started, I told my team, like if we ever have a hack or a breach or whatever, we're probably dead in this industry. Like we have to think that way from the very beginning. But as you use AI, you're tapping into different tools. And so you're going to be pushing information into different systems. Like by nature, your information is probably going to be in more systems in the future than it has been in the past. So we use like OpenAI's models, or we use Google's models. And there's some things we do to control for it, but the reality is, like, in order to access the power of AI, you're going to have to put client data into those systems. And there's ways you can do that securely. But every firm owner needs to be thinking about that, because you are, as you have more SaaS vendors, it's really, really important that you understand risk and that you start to think about how to manage that risk for your clients. Quickly on that note, like SOC 2 has to happen. We're just starting our SOC 2 audit, actually. We'll be SOC 2 Type 2 before the end of this year. That's the table stakes these days. But that's about internal controls. I actually like talking to you guys about this. This is an important talk track, actually, for me. I'm just going to spend like 2 minutes on it. SOC 2 is important. It's all about internal controls. It has nothing to do with how you use client data. So you need to ask more questions than just like, are you SOC 2 Type 2, which has historically been kind of what we all ask. Because SOC 2 doesn't measure where you're pushing client data to. Like it's all about internal control systems and backups and how your systems scale and a million different things. It's a great tool for certain things, but it's not comprehensive enough to manage the risk that you have with using client data in AI systems. So you need to make sure your vendors are not training on your data. They can train on user data, but they should never train on client data, right? So when you guys look at a document and we extract the information and you tell us, like we say, hey, box 10, I don't know what this is, and you tell me what that is, I'm tracking that I missed box 10 on that form, but I'm not keeping your client data so I can go back later and train my systems on it. That's a really important distinction. And I think it's like kind of misunderstood in terms of what training really means in these systems, and it's an important question to ask, like, are you retaining and training on my client data? If they are, you should probably not work with that company. And then retention is the other piece, right? So you got to retain data to a certain level to be able to run a SaaS product, because you don't want to go in and I don't have any of your client information, you got to re-upload it, right? So at a very basic level, you got to retain data. But the AI models themselves should not retain data. So there's like, we belong to a zero data retention program for all the models that we use. They don't retain or train based on that data. If you pay for the paid version of like ChatGPT, as an example, they won't train on your data, but they still retain your data. But for a vendor, for us, like we actually take the time to anonymize that data before we send it over. And it's not the end of the world if you're paying for it. I actually don't think that that's a terrible thing, but you should know that they're retaining that data and how long they're retaining it for, and be thoughtful about how you're using client data in that context. So yeah, we'll go into the product here in just a minute, but I do want to say, like on a personal level, I actually never wanted to start a software company. I did not want to join the dark side with Peter. I know how hard that job is, and how skeptical firm owners are, and how hard it is to take time to do things like this. Because to be honest, for a long time, I just didn't believe any of what people were saying. But I wanted my weekends back, and I got tired of trying to do it the old way with people, and it just wasn't working for me. So I was kind of forced into this. I really wish someone had just started it for me, but they didn't. So I want to show you a little bit about the product. I'm going to do this real quick. But let me pull it up here. Bear with me. All right. So this is what we built, and you'll see a couple things in here. So we have a tax preparation automation platform. So we basically take your information from PDFs and JPEGs, whatever it might be, and we enter that information into your tax software. So let me just reload this here real quick on this internet. There we go. If I go into Daisy Ducky here, obviously a made-up client, you'll see, basically I'll show you what this looks like. I'm just going to show you 4 screens because I don't want to make this like a salesy demo, but I do want to give you a sense of what's possible. And we'll start here. Sorry, bear with me. This I'm going to zoom out just a bit, so be aware that this is a little wonky because of the size of this screen over here. You can upload documents. Very soon you'll be able to hit export from your client organizer in TaxDome and have everything pop up automatically by client, which is going to be really fantastic. Like dragging and dropping stuff to different systems is a waste of your time and life and should go away as quickly as possible. Our system will process those documents. We do ask you if you upload, you can upload a completely random list of handwritten expenses, right, for a Schedule C, and we can process that. We will ask you, is this a Schedule C or a Schedule E rental or a Schedule F? But on all the source documents, you won't need to classify anything. So we know it's a 1099-R. We know it's a brokerage statement. And you can upload it as all like one PDF or 500 different PDFs. Makes no difference for us, or JPEGs or HEIC or any sort of like image file that you have. And then what we're doing is using two different types of AI to process these documents. But no matter how much AI you use or how good these systems are, they're not going to be 100% accurate. They're just not. So we have a human-in-the-loop process that where we surface fields where we don't have high confidence or where our models don't agree. So we use like OCR and we use foundational models, two very different types of AI. They're both really accurate, like 95% plus. Used in combination, they're even more accurate than that. Like we're 99.9 plus on most forms, which is pretty phenomenal. Frankly, probably as good as many of the humans that we're using, right? That's why we've got reviewers looking at things, because they're not 100% accurate. But we will surface the things that where we have low confidence. So if we, even low for us is like 90+%, but not 100%, or the models disagree. And so we actually have this, my admins run this process, but you'll see here, I uploaded a Schedule C so you guys can see this process. But if I had on like a brokerage statement, let me just pull one of these up here. You can see all the different forms that we're pulling off here on the right and all the data inside of these forms. So if I go to like, I don't even know what this one has, but if I go to long-term with reported or without reported, you can see we've extracted like the proceeds, the basis, whether or not it's from collectibles, wash sales, all the different things that you would anticipate off this brokerage statement in just like a few seconds. I usually run this in real time. I wasn't sure about the internet today, but it takes like 1 to 2 minutes to process this, and we'll process a few hundred fields of data off your different source documents for a typical return. On the Schedule C, I'll show you just real quick. This is really cool. I'll try not to bore you too much with AI, but you know, Schedule C is unstructured data, right? People are going to use a chart of accounts, or they're just going to send you a list of expenses. And it's going to be completely random. They're going to call their chart of accounts different things. At best case scenario, they send you a P&L from QuickBooks, which is probably not realistic on a Schedule C. But even if they did that, those things are going to be named different things, right? So I don't know where to put them on the tax return as an AI system, even if I know what that data says. We're really good at reading the data from a CSV or an Excel document or a PDF or a handwritten note. But what it's not good at is knowing where that needs to go on the return. And so we have this mapping process where you tell us where that data should go. Again, like it's easy enough that my admins actually do this part. The one thing that was complicated in talking to them was, okay, if they send me depreciation and I'm calculating that in my software, then we need to skip that, right? Or if they send me a home office or a car, I might have that on the return in a different way. And so those are like the things you have to look out for. But because of that, I mean, it's coming in as unstructured data, we actually force a human to review a Schedule C or a rental property or Schedule F, right? All very similar, you know, in terms of the structure. But you can map, and you'll see like we even group, I'll show you just this one thing here. So we group all the different sales categories here into one. So it really doesn't take long to do this. You just kind of go category by category. If I wanted to switch something, I could do it right here. And off we go. I've got like our Schedule C ready to import. Two other things I'll show you. And again, like I'm going to move pretty quick through this because it's not meant to be, you know, a sales demo. But there's two other pieces. So I run an export. Bear with me here. I'm going to just flip over into my actual software. So we have a local app that will enter the data like you do as a human on your computer. So you can see like I'm running on a MacBook. I would export to ProConnect typically on this, and you guys can go watch a demo online if you want to. But basically, I just select the client, I hit export, and then it's going to work on my desktop and enter all that information in my tax software. So the reason for that is we can integrate with tax software that's locally installed on your desktop, installed on a virtual server, installed on RightWorks, installed anywhere, basically. And we work already with, I think, We have 5 different types of software today, so ProConnect, Lacert, UltraTax, Drake, and Access is launching in the next couple weeks. We'll probably do Pro Series after that. But we can work in any environment on any of those pieces of software, which is pretty remarkable. And kudos to our engineering team, one of whom is running around here somewhere. Pretty phenomenal that we can integrate in any of those environments. And we do that because we have this local app that will actually do all the data entry for you. And it takes it enters about 100 fields per minute, so it takes a couple minutes. So within like 4 or 5 minutes, again, my admins have done the data entry on a return. They've created the work paper because we have a work paper that we create. They've done a consolidated PDF that's bookmarked of the form types. And then they've entered all the information into the tax software. So pretty phenomenal how quickly they go through that. And that's where my tax preparers start. So now they're still going to have to do like information off the organizer. It's unstructured. So that's part of why we don't enter it automatically. We just can't do it with 100% accuracy. We do review it later, and I'll show you that in just a minute. But we don't enter it because we want to make sure that anything we're putting in the tax software is really accurate, right? So I don't want to be like, I could actually look at unstructured data and say you got married this year and put that and change your filing status. But what if they say they got married and what they meant was they got married in January because they were filling out the organizer in 2025 and it's the 2024 tax return, right? Like little examples like that are reasons why AI for a very long time is not going to do 100% of a tax return. It's really hard for AI to gather context from clients. That's what humans are really good at. Bear with me here, guys. Sorry about that. Speaking of computers breaking down, that is why we need humans to fix things. So on this, I'll show you a review step here. This is a demo database, but let me show you what review looks like just for a second. And this just launched last week. Very, very excited about this and where this goes over the next couple months. Because we can understand the data from end to end, so we know the source documents with really high accuracy because your team has told us that all the fields are correct. And then when you finish the return, you pull it back into our system, and we can then review the 1040 itself. Some of this overlaps with what you do in your tax software in terms of like critical diagnostics, right? Like, oh, you have trying to think, you need like an 8938 because you have stock without basis or whatever it might be. But the tax return software doesn't catch everything, right? And so you have these reviewer checklists, and we actually built this product using the review process at my firm. So first we have like all the source documents, and we trace every field to the actual 1040. So it will tell you like this is where wages, like you have 2 W-2s and they add up to the amount of wages you have on your tax return. We can check that automatically because computers are really good at that stuff, right? It's not that difficult, honestly, once you know the inputs. So we go back through and trace it, and that's what a human does, right? Like you guys probably still go back to your source documents for a tax return, and you go back and review all of them. That is not something you are going to need to do in the near future. I stopped doing that this year for the first time, and it felt really weird at first, to be honest with you. But then it felt really liberating afterwards because I was really only having to go back and review like brokerage statements where there were complex transactions with no basis. Big time saver, and to be honest, late at night, there was just nothing worse than going back through like 20 different PDFs and like making sure on page 2 that there's not another copy of something or it's like the same W-2, whatever it might be. Very big deal here for, at least for me on a personal level. And then the next step, once you go through those source documents and make sure everything got entered properly, is the reviewer checklist. And so we literally took this from my firm originally, and then we've worked with a few other firms to make it better. But we built a couple hundred AI agents that do one thing very well. And they will look through everything you can imagine on a tax return. We basically went through all the mistakes that my preparers had made over the last few years and built that out in addition to what reviewers normally check, which is like, did a filing status change? There's an early distribution from an IRA? Is there a penalty calculated, right? They underpaid, like did we calculate a penalty for underpayment? A million different things. And again, there's some overlap with tax software there, but I find our tax software is not, it doesn't know the source documents. And so it can't go back and actually look at what was in the source documents to be able to check it in a more robust manner. That's why you still have a human looking at all these things. So we're trying to eliminate the double check on data entry in the first step. And in the second step, we're trying to make sure there's no mistakes. And funny enough, actually, we were just talking about this morning. 2 of the people on my team found mistakes that their accountants had made using this, because my team was like using this to test with their own personal data, which is really funny. And one of my guys was is an Indian national who came to the U.S., was exempt from federal tax in some way because of some tax treaty. And he pinged me about it, and I was like, "Yeah, I don't work with, like, that's not just my typical client, so I don't know the answer to this, unfortunately." But he used this, and he's like, "Dude, I was exempt from whatever it was, Social Security, Medicare, federal tax, and it saved him a few $100s." And he had worked part-time last year, so that was actually a pretty big amount of money for him. And so, like, pretty phenomenal to think about what this is going to be able to catch, because the reality is, like, humans just aren't going to catch everything, right? There's some, like, an IRS study a few years back. They gave the same set of data to like 12 different tax preparers, and they got something like 10 different tax returns. It's not as objective as everyone thinks, right? That's just the reality of it. I love that my clients think I know everything, but I do not actually know everything. So it's really helpful to have a double check. Also helps you sleep at night when you're not the last, last one checking these returns, ideally. And then there's a couple other things here, and this, again, we just launched this on Friday, so we're still building this out, but you can upload an organizer. It will check the unstructured data. So if they say they got married or they had a child, it will actually go through and make sure that their filing status changed on their 1040, or that they added a dependent on the 1040. And then we'll have a really high fidelity, like, year-over-year comparison, and that's coming here in the next few days. But the point is, like, it's not just about data entry. AI is going to start to be a reviewer for you as well. It's going to prepare and it's going to review. And it's going to make your life a lot better because of that, not having to be the last sanity check before something gets filed. And whoops, sorry, bear with me here. Yeah, so I want to end on a ray of hope here, which is, we've had a major impact in my firm. This is why I did this, to improve life for small firms. Like, this costs a fraction of what a person costs. And it's not about whether you use Juno or not. That's not the point today. The point is that there are good things coming. And if you get your data in the right spot, and it starts with practice management and data management, all those things, you will have some amazing tools to take advantage of, whether it's us or somebody else. And I'll go back to, like, the no overtime. I mean, I went on spring break for the first time with my family in a decade. Since I've been a firm owner, I've never gone on spring break. My wife hates it. And frankly, I hate it, actually, because I'm missing out with my kids. And I was able to do that. Now, I still had a couple clients that called me. I was not completely on spring break, but I was at spring break, which is like step one. And a couple people owed a lot of money, so they really wanted to get a hold of me during that time. But it was like 2 calls in a week, and I will take that. So I think there are some amazing things coming. It's really cool to work with a team like TaxDome that has a vision that is just so passionate about making our lives better. And so that's a big part of why we really resonate with them and wanted to partner with them, and we'll be announcing more about that in the next few weeks. But wanted to encourage all of you, like, as you start to put the building blocks together, the technology is coming, and it's going to make our jobs better. You don't have to worry about being the last, frankly, the last standing defense against some sort of mistake on a tax return hundreds of times a year, right? Or worry about a letter coming in and what it might be. It's going to get better, and it's going to get better very quickly. So I hope we'll be able to be a part of that story with all of your firms. And if not, there's some other great technology vendors too, but keep your mind open. You're going to have to spend more time understanding technology, adopting technology, and training your staff on technology over the next few years, but you will benefit from it. And hopefully I'll see you guys on spring break somewhere down the road.